Hello. Dragons are my favorite mythical creatures. And Sawyer Lee is my second favorite science fantasy writer with a popular YouTube channel. His art style is instantly recognizable, and his work reminds me of both Monster Hunter and How to Train Your Dragon, both of which I adore. Somewhat surprisingly though, my favorite videos of his are the ones that aren't about the dragons, but about the other creatures that share the world with them. Especially the video titled World Building Dragon Culture, How Monsters Affect Societies. Which is the whole point of his creation after all. I remember one of the comments in that video called it Dragonpunk, and I liked that term so much I decided to use it as an unofficial term for that type of genre. In fact, I'm so into that concept that I decided to give my own take on it. No, this isn't a review of Sawyer Lee's work. If it was, the whole video would be me fanboying over every single detail. Instead, I will talk about how I think life would adapt in a world with dragons. First things first. How powerful are these dragons? If they're just big animals with one or two fancy tricks, they will be driven to extinction by the humans just like all other megafauna. If they are like the Chroma Conclave, or the dragon from the Bible, then it's GG for humanity. A good balanced midway point needs to be met. I think a good power level would be that of Monster Hunter's apex predators. Powerful but not apocalyptic. A step above all other animals, but still very much part of the natural world. No human level intelligence though, as that would make them basically people instead of animals. It is also preferable if dragons possess classic draconic traits, such as tough scales, utilizing an elemental hazard, and either flying or being aquatic, among others, should also ideally be present. Otherwise they are just big reptiles. As for how the laws of physics would allow dragons to exist, it's just a different universe. Maybe a simulation. But certainly not magic, as that would complicate the equation. Okay, now that we got all that, let's jump to the fun stuff. How would everything else adapt in a world with dragons? I'm gonna start off with a controversial take here. Birds will not be affected all that much. Birds have coexisted with pterosaurs longer than either clade has existed on its own. So sharing the sky with massive reptiles is something they're fine with. Except maybe some of the larger bird species, the niches of which would be occupied by dragons. Mammals are a different story. With dragons as the apex predators, carnivorous mammals will be smaller and fit mesopredator niches. They may still scavenge dragon leftovers though. Herbivorous mammals will have an even harder time. Even if some dragons evolve into herbivores, I expect them to only fill the niche of truly titanic plant-eating animals. Reaching sizes mammalian anatomy doesn't allow. Mammals like oxen, rhinos, hippos, elk, and the like, won't face competition, but would be ideal prey for most dragons. For that reason they will need to adapt. I mentioned before that this experiment relies on physics allowing dragons to develop their unique traits. That could technically allow other animals to evolve similar traits too. Maybe a Bonacan-like creature could evolve to fight fire with fire. Or maybe can develop skin as thick as dragon scales, like Sawyer Lee's very own Hellmouth, and to a lesser extent Armorhead. But they will almost certainly shift towards a more R-selected reproduction strategy, giving birth to more youngs that they invest very little in. The animals that will be affected the hardest might actually be the reptiles. Diseases get transmitted easier between species that are more closely related. Also, viruses that are adapted for animals with higher body temperature tend to affect animals with lower body temperature a lot worse. Since dragons fly, I'd expect them to have a faster metabolism, and thus a higher body temperature than other reptiles. So any virus that jumps from dragons to other reptiles will have devastating effects. Amphibians on the other hand might be the breakout stars of this world. Their moist, mucus-covered skin may evolve fire-resistant properties. There's a very unlikely but nonetheless non-zero chance that salamanders turn into their mythical counterparts. They might even use this resistance to become specialized nest raiders. I also expect a plethora of different animals independently evolving into massive sea monsters, as the physics would allow it. Mostly because the sea dragons would need something to eat. Perhaps krakens can be to sea dragons what Portuguese man-o-wars are to blue sea dragons. Finally, what about humans? Sawyer Lee debated whether or not humans can even evolve in a world dominated by dragons. I'd argue that they can, and not just because I want them for reference. Human-sized prey is too small for a predator bigger than a T-Rex to go after. It might be funny to think that in a world where giant fire-breathing monsters exist, the humans would actually fear leopards and wolves instead. It might actually be worse, as those predators are likely to associate smoke and fire with dragon leftovers, and actually approach them instead of avoid them. But just because humans and dragons don't interact directly doesn't mean they won't clash. In our reality, humans drove most megafauna to extinction due to overhunting. This is certainly a possibility here, but I don't like that outcome. I was rewatching Dragons, a fantasy made real recently, and was reminded that, oh yeah, if dragons were just animals, humans would just hunt their prey to extinction and cause them to be wiped out. That's why I decided to amp up the power level of my dragons. And it doesn't really have to end like that. The main reason humans were such effective big game hunters in our world was their use of fire, and big sharp objects. Creatures that have evolved to survive dragon attacks most likely have a counter to both of those things. So they might actually stand a chance against the humans too. Where dragons will really affect humanity in this world, is in my opinion the development of agriculture. Or rather the lack thereof. No society will rely on growing crops in mass when a dragon can just swoop down and burn it. No society would rely on herding livestock in mass when a dragon can just swoop down and snatch it. My guess is that this world's humans will be forever stuck in hunter-gatherer societies like those of Earth's prehistory. I also don't think they would have to live entirely underground either. Something like the Newrig of ancient Sardinia, except bigger and communal, should be enough to keep the dragons out. The presence of sea dragons, and possibly other monsters, will definitely make seafaring a lot harder. But it might also provide a unique opportunity. If these creatures have to return to land to lay their eggs like sea turtles, coastal civilizations will have access to an abundant source of food. Maybe these cultures will comb the beaches seasonally and gather eggs, harvesting just enough to ensure that the remaining ones will grow up to produce the next generation and repeat the cycle. They might even form a celebration around this event, like our world's harvest. Could humans ever tame dragons in this world? No, most certainly not. There is no way humans could gather enough food to feed a dragon, especially without agriculture. If the two species are to cooperate at all, it will probably be something like the tarantula and the frog. For those who don't know, certain species of tarantulas allow small frogs to live in their burrows. The frog eats the insects that can harm the tarantula's eggs, and the tarantula protects the frog from predators. Humans might similarly find shelter in dragon lairs and protect their eggs from salamanders, while the dragon keeps mammalian predators away from the humans. I could go on and mention how humans would mythologize dragons, but I think everyone would have figured that out. In our world we mythologize ordinary animals, and we have myths about dragons in every culture even though they don't even exist. Of course, if they were real, people would have gone crazy with stories about them. I could also go into detail about different civilizations or species, but then we'd be here forever. So, I'm probably gonna close here. Feel free to use any of the ideas I just mentioned in your own works if you want to. Heck, I pretty much took the whole concept from someone else, so how could I ever claim anything? Goodbye.